Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Ang.
And I'm Cindy Kay,
Welcome to our podcast, Superpower and Sidekick.
where we team up with spirit to live a life beyond our imagination. Even though sometimes reality just feels like reality. it's the, we were discussing it before we started, but I've had some disappointments this week, and I've had a frustrating week. Starting with some food poisoning that took a little longer to overcome than what I had hoped for, and bringing some things that I need to make changes on into focus. And I think sometimes that's what we forget is our challenges show us where we need to shore things up. And, that life is a constant tweaking. I don't think you ever get it right and boom, that's where, okay, now I got my life right and this is where it's going to stay. No matter what, we're having to pull in that other pillar to balance. Okay, well, we've got plenty of this and we got plenty of this, but we seem to be missing this. So we got to pull this in. And then you get that tended to and you see that, oh, but this over here now is lacking and I got to reshore it up. And it's just a nonstop making sure those three stool legs are all there underneath us.
Yeah, and I think what we find difficult or pisses us off, I think, is what we need to focus on more. Don't you think?
I think so because I think we go through life not even knowing what we like and don't like. And we're so used and trained to suppress and repress any negative emotions that we don't allow them to show us where our boundaries in life are. And a lot of times I've talked about it in some where we end up dissociated and we'll stay in a very uncomfortable situation way past the time we should have walked away. But not even just that. You know, Generally when there's anger there's some kind of change that needs to happen in your life. Either it's from you or the person that you're in a relationship with, but the change is always with ourselves. Even if it's just, hey, don't do this. I need space for a minute.
But change is with us, though.
Well, that's just like a family. Co-creation is real. We are never create. I don't care how solitary you are. My dad was a hermit, but he still didn't create alone. He still had relationships in his life. And we definitely, the minute you're in any type of a relationship, you're co-creating at that point with any and every relationship that we have. It's a co-creation into this. Now, where a lot of people may not realize is because we've all been indoctrinated the exact same way. So when we get together, we don't realize that because we're all just doing the same thing that we've all been conditioned for. But then when one person walks in that hasn't been conditioned the same way as this group does, that entire dynamic will change. It only takes one person that was not indoctrinated the same way that everybody else in the group was, and it's going to create complete ripples across the entire community.
But what if you have someone who isn't indoctrinated and is enabling you to continue your same patterns?
That's where we have to choose. Do we need to make boundaries? Do we want to keep creating with this person? Is that in our best benefit? And that's something else I don't think we do is actually check in. Is this in my best interest
Yeah.
to continue to do this with this person and in this way?
So, how do you co-create differently with this person if they're not aware of their patterns?
That's where boundaries are absolute imperative. I think even if we're in relationships, we still have to have the space to be who we are and allow our creations. Okay, speaking of that, someone's calling me. Okay, okay. So, but we were talking of if the other person is conditioned in a way that won't allow the other person in the relationship to have their freedom, then decisions are going to have to be made. Because I think you can still stay in a relationship if you have good enough boundaries. And I'm not talking about locking people out. I'm just saying not taking on other people's misery is all I mean by that. Because so often it's actually our attitudes. And that's when, I've had an attitude this week, but I've also been extremely aware of it and are communicating it to my family and not just saying, you're my problem. I'm telling you, I got some kind of issue going on right now, and I don't want anyone to have to walk on eggshells. I'm just letting you know where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think that helps when you just lay it out on the table and say, "Hey, I'm in a pissy mood right now." Just
And that's, it took me a few years to retrain Mike of, if you're in a bad mood, I am not your punching bag, period. And I will do my best to make sure when I'm not in a mood to not make you into my, and I did it by exampling, hey, if I'm in a crappy mood, of just expressing I'm in it, but not putting it on you when I do that. And how can we express it and just say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with in my situation right now, and I want to say it out loud, but I don't want to put it on you to fix, because I also don't think it's his job to fix my disappointment.
Yeah, communication is very important. And feeling your emotions, if you're feeling it in the moment, you tell that person so that they can give you the space. And if they can't respect your space, then you you can punch them. But
I actually let out a scream today, just like, we're having some parking issues, and I went to go let Mike out so he go get this dresser drawers, and I had to let him out with this truck. And we had one little spot, and right then someone pulled up into that spot, and then I couldn't go there, and then I just sat there for a minute because I didn't know what to do, and just screamed it out. And it was actually a girlfriend that had parked it, and she came over. I'm like, just so you know, this is not on you in any way, shape, or form. And and she actually got to it real quick, and saw where the frustration was coming from, and that it was not on her in any way, shape, or form. It just is what it is, and that's just it. I'm feeling, probably the best way to say it is, my skin's a little too tight. I'm probably fixing to shed a skin, but in the midst of that, whenever we go into the cocoon, before we go into mush and find our wings, sometimes things get a little chaotic and gooey. And I think I'm in a gooey stage. You know, I've had messaging for over 25 years about something that is going to happen in my life. And then something actually happened 5 years ago towards it, and it all looked like it's a go. And then I was told again that I had to wait, that it wasn't time and we couldn't move forward. And something in the last couple of weeks have just busted in me, like, I am tired of waiting. But also, what we're talking about cannot, absolutely will not be forced. There's not a darn thing I could do to force it down the road. In fact, any energy of that, I think, could probably postpone it. So, how do we get ourselves in line when there's something bigger than ourselves at play? So, it's not time yet. We have to find our patience. But also, so for myself, it's finding things to do that still help me to find the fulfillment that I'm seeking, even if it may not be this big thing that I'm have been guided about. And for me, it has never actually been about the big thing anyway, so that's not necessarily a problem. But it is difficult. I have chemical sensitivities, and I can't just go work out in the world like somebody else. So I'm trying to reinvent the wheel and do things from the inside of my home. But I also have had a fear of social media and expressing myself on social media. So I'm working on overcoming all of those things.
yeah, so they're kind of preparing you for the next steps, but it's taking longer, and so it is frustrating. But you're absolutely right. You cannot force it any further, and I think it's correct that if you the more you force it, the longer you're going to delay it.
I think the more that, we put resistance to what is because we want something else, that's where we actually can create our blocks. And so, even though I'm going through this, I'm also very aware of the energy. And I'm probably more aware of the energy that it's putting in these gaps than I ever have been. And seeing how they are not productive or beneficial to me or to this whole thing to move forward. But also, I also realized that it's an energy that's probably been under the surface for a long time, and that things have just recently brought up and brought it back, so that way I can deal with it too.
Right. It's like unclogging a pipe. You gotta
You had to deal with all the
slowly
different aspects.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's still some glitches there that might not uh yeah. What am I trying to say? Yeah, like glitches, like
Glitches.
you're not going to be prepared for what they're preparing you for until you get these glitches.
And what
I,
if those glitches are actually what you're going to help other people with?
right.
It,
I,
it's a, it's kind of like writing my book. I think the reason I haven't actually written my book yet is because I don't have the ending yet. I think there's still another thing to come in before that actually happens. Um, when I first had this messaging that something was going to happen 25 years ago, it was so far out of my realm. I couldn't even wrap my ego around it at all because I had such a low self-worth that I literally wanted to dig a hole and bury myself to make sure that that never happened. And really, that's what I've been addressing the last, I think I'm actually about a year and a half. I decided that the number one thing that I had to do was to open my voice. I didn't even, because I can speak, I can communicate. I'm really good at some communications, but I didn't realize that some of the problems that I was having in the imbalanced was because of being threatened at a young age, that if I ever spoke what happened to me, that I would cease to exist, that they would unalive me. Um, and that's some real serious psychological stuff. And the other thing, one of the things that I teach in my work is to deal with our relationship with money. A lot of people think money is much more physical than what it is. It's actually much more of an energy than it is a physicality. And the patriarchal world has turned it into something other than what I believe it to actually be. So if we can sit and deconstruct and reconstruct our relationship with money, then it changes from fear based to love based, and we can find that generous spirit that most of us would like to have, but we feel too poor or whatnot to be able to actually do it. Whenever I started doing this work myself, one of the first things that I discovered, and I'm going to say it outright, I was trafficked when I was 14 by a family member. And even though I had really worked on my own sexuality and owning my own sexuality, I didn't realize that I had my own self commerce stolen from me. And whenever I started doing the work, that was the first trauma that I had released from my limbic system. And it released in a way that I knew exactly what had happened, the timeline that it came through clearly. When it had happened to me, it was anything but clear. It was very jumbled and confusing and chaotic and traumatic. But when it came back out, whenever I started doing the work on purpose to find out where my blocks were, and that I had given up my commerce and not realized it, it left it. But when it came out, it made so much sense. And my brain finally was able to wrap around it for the first time. And it literally left what felt like a hole in my chest for almost 2 weeks after it removed. But I would call that a little glitch in the system. And it's actually just something that lives in our unconscious, subconscious mind through suppression and repression. But it can affect our lives today, here and now.
yeah. And so dealing with the glitches is actually releasing it so that the pipe is unclogged.
Releasing it and processing it. I think that's what we meant whenever we repress and suppress and repress. We don't get the chance to process it, to actually digest it so it can move on, and that's how it gets stuck. And it starts creating through our own unconscious. So, and that's just it. I've been really working on some of those deeper glitches. And that it's so funny. You'll find one glitch and then there'll be 10 more connected to that one. So it's almost like pulling a string. I started doing yoga nidra, and Mike thought that I had gained a new spiritual gift. And it was because as this stuff released, it released in a way that gave me sight and understanding. And I would verbalize it to, it would almost be like a montage as it was coming out. And I would verbalize it to him. And he goes, oh my gosh, I lived that with you. And I did not see it that way. And that makes so much sense. So it was even helping him to see some of the things that happened between us in a completely different light, not just me, but both of us, because I was sharing this as I was working on it. And so it would come out in a montage, but in a way that validated my experience and restored my self-worth.
I think that's what's most important is your self-worth. And a lot of us who are working through our dark shadows has to get to that point to really move forward. I mean, I think that's why we keep getting, stop and go traffic.
Well, so much of our inner dialogue is our abuser, whoever that might be. And maybe not even abuser, it doesn't have to be that way, but just someone that was in a different age than what we are today can also do that. But I mean, most people are not nice to themselves on any level. We have not been taught how to care for ourselves on the inside of our own head. Even though I've been dealing with some intense emotions, it's weird. It's kind of weird because I want to say that I'm having some, but there's a word for it and I can't think of the name of it, but imposter syndrome. But then I think about it and I know dang well I'm not an imposter. I mean, everything that I have come across, I've come across it kind of the hard way. I really worked hard for it. So I know I've earned it. So it's weird because I'm having these old kind of disappointments and stuff that used to would have really thrown me into imposter syndrome. But at the same time, I have such a solid sense of self now. It hasn't actually been able to completely throw me into it. And it's kind of a whole new dynamic that I'm existing in because I can't really beat myself up the way that I used to. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I think once you have that grounded faith or knowing, that helps a lot.
And that's ultimately why I started on the spiritual path, is I wasn't finding the love that I was seeking here in this physical realm. And so I turned to spirit for that love. And holy cannoli, when the clouds parted, I knew that there was nothing I could have ever done on this planet to have lost that love. It is absolutely, totally, completely impossible. But I can still go into the illusion that humans and society has said that we are all bad and unlovable and that concept. But it's a very physical concept. In the multidimensional world, it is not there. That love is so thick there's no way you could deny it. And that, a lot of the Dharma type, the harsh, let's just say harsh religions that start with you are bad and so you have to come to God to be good, I find them a huge fallacy. And I had to really work on my own okay, I'm just going to throw it all out there. Got pregnant at 15. Had a Baptist preacher tell me that I was going to go to hell because of what I'd done, and that my son was going to go to hell too. Period. There was no talking about it because I had a kid out of wedlock. This is what I had doomed me and my son to. There was no talk about restitution. There was no talk about love, just what I had done wrong and how I was going to burn in hell for what I had done. Now, don't get me wrong, because I know a lot of other Christians and I do understand redemption and the rest of the story. But unfortunately, that is not how it was played out to me at the beginning. And really, my path was overcoming that belief that I was damaged goods. And how many things in society have women thinking those kind of thoughts every single day?
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, especially when all you need is a comforting word, but instead you're getting condemnation and condemnation. Yeah.
And I don't want to discount somebody else's path through the church if they have found their salvation there and their love there and their community there. I don't want to diss anybody's experience. That was not my experience. And I had to seek it outside of the church parameters. And a lot of the things where I found my solace are actually considered to be evil in the church. So there was a whole kind of, okay, but what is right for me? Tarot helped me to, blowing bubbles, Tarot helped me to get some life skills that my dysfunctional family could not have offered me, and some ways and perspectives to see things in another way that helped me to find healing. For instance, because a lot of the work I was doing on my own, because I had really been turned away from some of the more community type support systems. So it became a self-study. And it's funny because I had a really strong experience whenever I was 13. I was baptized at a Christian summer camp, and I had a meet and greet with the divine spirit, with the Holy Spirit. It was an amazing experience. And I get home and my mother let me have it from one end to the other, that how dare I be a holy roller. So, and weirdly at the same time, I was reading, she worked a lot and I was home alone a lot, but she had several astrology books. So Sun Signs and Love Signs by Linda Goodman, and some other ones that I adored, and I read through them, and I was finding lots of my answers in there too. So I was seeking answers in anywhere around me, and I was finding them in all those places. And whenever I got older, though, whenever I would talk to other people about some of my psychic experiences, because they're not understood, and our society has purposely cut us off from the natural world and those forms of intuition and self-knowing. So when I started coming to it, a lot of it, I was told that that's the devil's work. And I'm like, but there was something in me that at the same time, like, but I know that I'm speaking with the divine within. There's no way that's the devil's work. But having to overcome a lot of society's perspectives about the intuitive mind, and someone who is psychic medium, who does hear beyond the physical veil. And I do know that it's a very very, very rich multidimensional world, that I can hear, see, and feel multitudes of things around me. And that was one of the things that actually sent me off my rocker this week, though, was when I got so sick on Saturday. I think I kind of got in that inner veil. I heard my dad's voice, and there was some other things going on, and he's already passed, which I sense him around a lot. But that's the first time I've heard his voice since he passed. So that was so, but really, it was hard to get grounded in the physical this week because I felt so multidimensional. But then I've talked to another friend who's intuitive, a lot different than me, but a lot like, where she's a Pisces, I'm a Scorpio, so we're both those water signs, which are deeply intuitive. And when she read it back to me yesterday, it's like, okay, at least it's not just me. Sounds like we're all going through it. I just had a thought come to me when I'm talking. You and I and some other people have done a lot on this planet to help reopen the magnetic grid and the ley lines and the multidimensionality of the planet herself. And I'm wondering if we're not reaching another level of that right now, and we're all picking up on it and feeling it. Reality as we know it is going to change. It's already changed. I mean, come on, it's almost like a cartoon out there right now. Like I'm watching a Spider-Man, Spider-Verse.
Yeah. Spider-Verse. Reality is not reality.
And up is not up and down is not down right now because of all the propaganda and everything else going on. That people are convincing people of some really crazy stuff out there. I have, the word cult this week has been something else. And coming out of a real strict teaching that in some ways was a cult, in some ways it was not, but in enough ways it was that I've had to heal from it. And a lot of what's going on out there is a little triggering because people are going to believe anything.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of a cult is that the leader is the one that convinces the followers that everything that he or she is saying is the truth and don't believe anything else.
Always.
Always. Yeah.
I
But
think
I find it interesting though that with all that's happening this week that my best way to deal with it is to just be an objective observer and to let go of any of those reactions or feelings and just watch. And I find that it's very, very interesting because
isn't
you
it?
really do see the truth in the lies. You see it so clearly.
And I'm talking both. I'm not just talking one because
Yeah.
they're real quick right now. It's, oh no, it's all just the one. I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
it's both. And I have to really just step back up. And that's just it. You're so perfect, though, about going to the witness place for it. And that's, I think it was 2004 when I first got the message. I was like, I thought you sent me here to change the world. And I hear, no, we sent you here to change your perspective of the world. And you would know, and then you would know it's perfect just the way it is. I'm like, this world is perfect? What the? But 20 years later, I'm like, oh, they had a point.
Yeah, because you have to have that dichotomy, right? Good,
Yep.
bad, black, white. You have to have that dichotomy in order to see the other side. And once you have that other perspective, then you can really understand it better.
But you have to have both perspectives,
Right.
not just one. And
Right.
that's what so many people don't realize. They're just having the one perspective, but they haven't had the other side of the perspective yet. Once that happens, because evolution's happening, so it's going to happen for them. I do believe that. And the more that we experience both sides of that reality, we're going to realize that neither one of them are true.
Yeah, and I think that's where the discernment comes in is when you take yourself out of that equation and just observe.
Well, what we're trying to bring into society, one reason why it's so difficult is because no one can wrap their heads around it. There's a story about when the Spanish were coming to the shores of the Americas, and that the chief would have to describe it to the rest of the tribal members because they physically could not see the ships because they had never seen them. They were not in their realm, so they physically could not see them, even though they were right in front of them. Until the chief described and explained it to them, then they were able to see it. It's a lot of people know that story, and that's just it. So when men think that the women feminists are being, I'm sorry, I had a whole thing where I heard about the trad wife this week and other kinds of patriarchal values that are trying to pull us all the way back to the 1920s and before that. That's not what it's about. And it's not about women being on top of men or men being on top of women. In this constant nonstop power struggle, it's about letting the power struggle go, that it's for all of us. It's not against all of us. But because it's such a foreign concept, people can, they think matriarchal is the opposite of patriarchal, and matriarchal is nothing to, it's not even in the same category. So you can't, it's not apples and oranges to compare. It's a society that holds everybody's best interest at heart. That's not communism. That's not all the different propaganda words that the status quo that would do anything to keep things in the dark ages that we're at and not have growth tell us that it's horrible and bad. It's okay to have a society that cares about its members. We're allowed to construct that.
Well, of course, we are the ones who have to construct it because we live in society.
But what if we do not have a concept of it because it has been so far out of our realm that we can't even wrap our heads around it? Because almost always it's turned into tit for tat and everyone starts arguing over the last piece of pie. But it's a whole nother concept. It's not about the last pizza pie. It's that every one of us can go into the kitchen and bake a new pie.
Yeah, we've been saying that for how many podcasts now?
I know. But we are going to have to start taking some of our power back, though, for that. We cannot put all of our food, all of our clothing, everything into the hands of the corporations and then tell them to not screw us. Do you see how we're kind of backwards here? We're going to have to take some of that back and start doing it for ourselves again. And we're going to have to not buy into the belief that we have to have everything convenient because we have to be out there working for the force. All of this is slavery. None of this is working in our best interest. But we can do it on smaller scales in our own homes, even if we can't affect that on a bigger change. We can quit giving our choices away with our dollars every time we buy something. We can learn how to make and cook for ourselves again and quit eating all the chemicals that they're putting in our foods. We can go and shake the hand of our farmers again and get to know them. There are pathways to do all of that.
Yeah, we went to pick cherries for ourselves
And they
and
were
then pay
best
for
tasting
it.
cherries. Were they the best tasting cherries you've ever had? Yeah, and then you had to pay for it, right?
And then you got to pay for it.
But it
You're the
doesn't
one that
cost
did
as
it.
much.
No, it wasn't as much as the grocery store, but it's yeah.
Well, I don't know how to even get to where I'm wanting to say about. I think there is some big changes coming, and I can feel them and sense them. But I am the native on the beach, and I need a chief to explain it to me because I can feel it, I can sense it, and I think my frustration is I want it to be here already.
I know it is very frustrating. But I've learned that if you just let go of your reactions and be an objective observer, you'll make it through this phase.
Thank you. I'm so glad I've been telling you all that so that way you can tell me all that today. But that's a perfect example. None of us are above another one of us. It doesn't work that way. That's it. That's the fallacy, is the hierarchy. That's why the cult works, is because people believe the hierarchy. And it is not true.
Hmm.
I think number one, that's the biggest problem we have in society today, is we are in a caste system. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, I have heard, just yesterday I was going through some stuff, and some of the things that I was hearing from straight people about Pride Month was like, we have not gotten anywhere. I could not believe how big the misunderstanding really is.
Why were straight people saying why do they get a whole month
Yeah,
to
where's
celebrate?
the straight Pride Month? Well, are you being killed in the streets for your lifestyle? No. Then you don't need one.
Yeah, I love that argument. Why isn't there a straight pride?
Because people do not ostracize people for being straight or cisgendered. Same with
And
white.
every day is straight people's pride.
Well, and the amount of people I have heard. Well, more people in this country need to read the Bible this week. Mm-hmm.
How do you get through to those people, or do you even try?
No, Lord, no, no, I don't try.
Yeah.
It's not my job. It is my job, though, to not be affected by their false narrative of me or others. And I'm having to work on that a little more this week than what I do normally, because I had a rougher week. But generally, I know that in a good way in my heart, that they could say things left and right and it's not going to affect me, because I've expressed to you about being raised in very racist community, and when they would talk about them having to hold on to the majority, that it would actually make my stomach sick. I was 6 and 7 years old, but I knew what they were saying was not good for everybody they were talking about. And I could feel the imbalance of that. And I think that's what I'm trying to address here, is that our society is really misbalanced because of some of these core beliefs that have been there for a very, very long time. And they are racist, and they are bigoted, and they are elitist, but all of them go into the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Male cisgendered men, and then I think it's actually gay men
Mm-hmm.
before women,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes on down if you just look out into the world and the way that people are accepted or not accepted.
Right.
And I would think, because I do feel it sometimes so deep to the core of my being, then more than likely I have some kind of a destiny with it in my life of of I know what it's like to be dehumanized in order for other people to use you in a way that does not benefit you. And because of that experience, I can empathetically connect to a lot of other people on this planet that have been through that. And they do use dehumanization tactics, and that is part of what has me triggered this week, is I'm seeing and hearing a lot of that out there right now. And as much as I would like for it to not affect me, I'm human. It very much so affects me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you've gone through it and you know how it feels. It's hard.
And I actually hear it from both political parties right now, basically talking about the other one like they're dirt. It's a dehumanization on both sides. I see it, I don't think it's one way or the other. And I feel for both sides. I feel for humanity, period, that's what we have to do an election in this society. And I don't want to make this about politics, because I think it's actually something quite bigger. It's just that that's where I'm seeing the dehumanization currently.
Well, because it's there, it trickles down to us because it's out in the open, so we see it more.
Well, and even all the ads that are using the handsmade um, tell picture graphics and things, like it's just constantly in your face right now. And it's like half the world is fighting against that and half the world is fighting for that. And I don't think either one of them are actually a healthy way for a woman to be, regardless. That somehow or another both can infringe on our freedom.
Yeah, I know it's so hard because you're judging the other side or somebody else who's different or whose viewpoint is different, and yet you're bashing them the same way they're bashing you. So,
We got to take dehumanization out of our arguments and find a better way to get our own point across without having to dehumanize the other group to do so. And that's why, even whenever I will express my frustration with Christianity because of some of the experiences that I had that definitely turned me away from it, but I think it also turned me away to see that it, like everything else, can be used against people as well as for people. That it's not the elite group that it tries to present itself as. Also, to find my own self-worth within somebody else's, that they can perceive me however they want to, but it matters on how I perceive me. And that's the reason I'm saying I'm not against anybody that chooses religion for their path, or that's not. I honor all paths, and anyone that wishes to find the divine, you have my blessing. Do it any way that it feels right to you. I would never want to say otherwise. And I think that is actually, I want just more room for that. Our intuitions might sound a little different. They might look a little different. I don't want anybody to be told that they're crazy or that they're the devil or evil because they have psychic gifts. I would like to bring more understanding into the world so that way they're not just framed within the religious scope, but more in a how-to scope, because a lot of us have them and we wish to use them. So not believing that we're bad because we're doing it a different way than the way everybody else is doing it.
Exactly. There's other ways to do things, different ways to do things, and the goal is the end goal is the same. How you get there is different.
There's one song, I think, 77 Paths to Heaven, you know, 77 million paths to heaven, 77 quadrillion paths to heaven. I don't think that there might be a right way for you, but it's just like diet. If we all ate the same way, we're not all going to be healthy. We have to customize it to ourselves. And, but there's so many things within our society right now that have been the psychic skills have been framed as negative and bad, and basically using those to dehumanize us. If you look in almost all media, telepathy is portrayed as being quite evil. I've been naturally telepathic my entire life. So it was hard to be told that I'm evil when I don't think I'm not an evil person. Um, but it really sent, because I have that gift naturally, to have it constantly be judged in the media can be difficult. I want to do one podcast at some point just on ethics and values within psychic and medium type work, because okay, for one thing, whenever I really did realize I definitely telepathic, not only could I pick up thoughts, but I could transfer thoughts too. And I was first playing with that. And we were decorating a theater for Christmas, and our boss ran to town to get some of the supplies. And I was up on a ladder decorating a tree, and I wanted donuts. So I decided I'd do a little experiment and let my boss know I wanted donuts. And I'm doing this and I'm sending it to her energetically. And then I think, wait a minute, but it's not okay to mess with her free will. What if she's on a diet and she really doesn't need that kind of a temptation around? So I immediately stopped myself and I said, unless you're on a diet and you don't want them, then of course don't get them. This woman walked in with the bags from all the stores she'd been. She went and laid them on the table and she goes, okay, y'all, I just want to tell you, I was on my way to get donuts for you guys. And then I remembered I'm on a diet and I do not need the temptation. So I didn't bring y'all any donuts, just so you know.
Oh, that's funny.
But I've had, okay, one girlfriend one time, I called her up and I said, were you talking about me today and this, da, 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 da. And I said everything that I had heard in this conversation. She goes, Cindy, you could have been in the room and we're in Haiti, so I know you're not here. But you could have been in the room. And I don't do this for everyone, but they were talking about me. So I picked it up and she's like, word for word. But then there was another time I warned one of our friends, the way that she normally did things was not going to be taken well. And I just kind of gave her this little talking to about how she was dealing with something. I don't know how to explain this without saying, but anyway, something did go down, something bad did happen. But because I had warned her about it, she thought I was actually in on it, not knowing that I had picked it up through telepathy and that I did not physically know. There was no way I could have known that this was going to happen. It was only through telepathy that I had kind of picked up something I didn't think she really wanted to get involved with. So I kind of warned her and tried to tell her so it wouldn't happen. She thought I knew that because it did happen. And she thought I knew it because I was in on it. Absolutely not in on it. So telepathy can be weird to maneuver in the world because perception is wonky.
And you don't really want to force your will onto other people either.
And that's just it. I teach really good energetic boundaries, because you're actually messing with fire if you do stuff like that. For one thing, who you don't want to enter into anybody's energetic field without permission. I think we can send our friends telepathic thoughts. I don't think that's necessarily a boundary issue, but trying to instill your thoughts over theirs is never okay. And I would never even think, but there are people who would. There are people who do not have decent value systems in this world. But unfortunately, media only describes these skills in people who do not have integrity and ethics. If you have integrity and ethics and these latent ability psychic skills, you're not going to use them against people and against their will. But how many, I frequent a lot of different kind of spirituality stuff online, and inevitably every single group I'm in, someone tries to read me. Why do I feel jealousy and envy all around you? Why do I feel that, and people are coming in reading you without your permission. And I set back every one of them on their heels and tell them, while that I will not be seeking their services, and get out of my energy space now. You will never see me DM you telling you what that I picked up on. If you're a good friend and I feel something, you're going to know it, and we're going to talk about it, and it's not going to come through in that creepy vibe. And we get heads up for each other. That's a different situation. But purposely leaning into somebody else's energy to read them is never okay. The teaching that we took for many years taught to not have any energetic boundaries, and that's probably the number one thing I actually disagree with today, that I didn't know to disagree with at the time we were learning it. I'm not going to transfer energy to somebody without someone's permission now, unless emergency situation, something like that's a different situation. But because of what I've learned as a reader, I find a lot of that stuff highly unethical now. Consent is everything. And I think when we work with people, we should have their consent. Honestly, I think the way of doing it that way was very patriarchal and very forceful.
But what if you're just sending it to them because you just want to help them without any,
Oh,
ill
well, now
will?
our love, I don't think anyone can put restraints on our love. And I don't think we necessarily need to. I think we can love at the best capacity that we possibly can. But that's different than an actual energy transfer, if you think about it. Expressing your love and sending your love to somebody. If I'm going to work in someone's chakra system, I'm going to tell them now that I'm there, personally. My techniques have changed for that. Where I do feel like I can absolutely send love and energy to someone that's having an emergency, or something's going on, or there's been a call out, hey, I need people's prayers. I need all the light right now. But absolutely, you've got complete permission to do so. I have a hard time with, I do not agree with anything that goes against somebody's consent.
Well, I don't think it came from the teacher, but it's
No,
more of the
I do not.
students who
I'm not saying it all, but
Yeah,
that's also a problem with some of the other religions around. It wasn't the person
yeah,
who brought it in.
exactly.
Almost all of those I have complete total respect for.
Yeah.
So,
It's all in the interpretation and how people take it or take it too far.
but a lot of people, when they are spiritual in nature, consider themselves to be elite and above others. And that, and some people, when they spout their morality, I have certain thoughts about all of that. First off, if you really had it, you should never have to even say it out loud. The more you have to say it, maybe that's so you can believe it. I don't know. And I don't believe, but I also don't believe in purity morality at all. I don't believe sexuality should be repressed or suppressed in the way that it is. Our society is so out of balance with our sexuality. We could start a whole podcast just to try to start bringing in healthy sexuality, because it's much more natural than what it's allowed today. And I think it can be a beautiful, expressive, spiritual experience. But it is definitely not portrayed that way in today's society. And I do not believe in what purity culture at all. I think that's where a lot of these problems have actually come from. By denying that we're human and sexual, look what happened to the Catholic priest. Maybe they should not have gone monogamous, or not monogamous, I'm sorry, celibate, because it didn't work for them. There was a huge problem within the organization. So maybe that wasn't the healthiest, that's just it. There's still some people out there preaching things that have been proven that don't work. Time has proven that doesn't work.
But I feel like it's this whole sense of morality, superior morality that people hold over these other people,
That
right?
that they hold it over my okay, I'll be my father. I'll use my father because he's dead and he won't mind if I use him. He didn't like Christians and he was kind of loud about it because he's like, well, they think they can do it. And this is from my dad's perspective. This is not necessarily my perspective. And he would say, well, they think they can do whatever they want and then go to church on Sunday and they're forgiven, so it's all okay. And he would tell me when someone says, oh, well, you can trust me as a business person because I'm Christian. He said, I would usually put my wallet back in my pocket and walk into the next store down the road. And a lot of it was just because they like to speak about how perfect their morality was nonstop. But if you are not accepting of another person's lifestyle, then how are you the person to exemplify that morality? I think there are good and bad people in every single. I think there are bad people inside good people and people inside bad people.
Yes. Yes. Because there's always a good and a bad in us.
And I understand that if you use religion to work on bringing that good out more often than not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm down with it. But
Right.
it doesn't mean that your morality is above mine.
Right.
That's exactly what I was talking about with the cult and the hierarchy. And you bet Christianity in this day and age, and in fact, every day and age, is a cult.
Yes.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think they all are. So it's not that is not necessarily a put down. But if you have to have a hierarchy, there's a problem in your society. The whole god or goddess type thing. What if a little girl identifies more to a goddess than to a god? And why should she have to have a male priest stand between her and her divine being? And I do have issues with that. That at least, okay, I don't care how other people raise their kids, but don't judge me for how I raise mine. And if I allow my daughter to come, all of my children to come to whatever is right for them. I have one daughter that is extremely Christian and she finds her solace there. And I support her in her path 1000%. And I would never want to step in front of that in any way or change her choice. I want that to be her choice. I also want my other daughter who does not find Christianity to be fulfilling for her to be able to seek her own course.
As we all should be able
Yeah,
to.
exactly. But I think we need to talk about it more because there's a lot of shaming going out there. The shaming is really loud out there right now that if you're not Christian,
Mm-hmm.
you're lacking. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not a good message to. We're also not a Christian nation. We are not. And I'm tired of hearing it.
But they want us to be a Christian nation. That's the problem.
Well, the Iranians want theirs to be a Muslim nation. I don't think the Iranians want that. The Iranian government wants it to be Muslim.
Yeah.
How are we any different? How is this situation any different? If everyone doesn't have a choice in how they believe, I think everyone should have the right to seek the divine in what is right for them, and or if there is no divine as well. I have nothing against people who are agnostic either. So I think everybody has the right to pursue their happiness in whatever form, as long as that's just it. Morality is mute, in my humble opinion. The only time it can really be used if someone is harming another. Otherwise, it's mute. And if whatever people are doing is not harming another, personally, I don't think you have a right to say crap. Period. And that's why, the whole pride thing is so beautiful about lifting the lid off of bigotry. Because how is that harming another person, and yet they really think it threatens their world?
Right. How is a rainbow flag harming you? I mean, seriously.
I go to the Rainbow Gathering, and people think they're so confused anymore. My mom thought I went gay because I went to the Rainbow Gathering. But it means hope. We all use it for the same reason, that we all should be inclusive
Right.
together.
Yeah. All
By
the
me,
colors, all the colors of the rainbow, right? Everything is included.
it's also, if I support the person next to me, I am supporting myself. And it doesn't matter what color they are, what gender they are, how they view sexuality, or anything else. But if I lift them up, I'm automatically lifting myself up. If I push them down, I'm automatically going down with them. And that is what people are not realizing. And if we all work to lift each other up, rather than most of us are just trying to get our head above water because we've been pushed down for so long. Well, I think a lot of people are turning to different forms of spirituality because the confines of some of the more traditional religions were no longer fitting today. And I think a lot of people are seeking new answers to old questions. And I think one reason why is we're seeing that the tactics that have been used up until now are no longer working, that it is absolutely imperative for us to find some new ways to do things. And I know with working with intuition, that's one of the hardest things, because you want to ask spirit, but the minute you ask spirit, everything you know or don't know comes to mind. And then there's no room for a new way to do things. Like trying to explain to people that I personally do not think there is anything we can do to make democracy work at this point. I think that no matter what, polarized system where half the people are against the other half the people is never going to work. The Europeans are doing more of a multi-party system, and it is working at least better for them, but it's still not the perfect. That's just it. I don't think we can fix the current structure. It's going to have to be more of a wiping out and starting over. And I'm not talking about war and civil. People are yelling civil war right now out there. That is not what I'm.
Well, I don't think you can dismantle the system the way it is, but you can try to fix it and make it better. That's kind of
But there are
all.
things within the system that are going to have to be dismantled. Otherwise, the system is never, ever, 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 ever going to work.
Right. That's what I mean by change, is that some parts of it has to be destroyed and start over, and a new way of thinking or a new way of doing things has to be implemented.
Well, and that's theologically is an
Mhm.
interesting concept, because what came to mind right then was Christianity versus Hinduism, and not in a versus way, but just that the Hindus. I used to have these horrible dreams of Armageddon. And I was like 16, and Shiva came to me and explained to me why destruction was so important, because creation cannot exist without that clean slate. And, that's one of the things about theology. If you only have creator and that's the only thing you ever revere, and you don't revere the creation, the preservation, and the destruction, then you keep in place a system that no longer works. And that's where I think we are right now.
Yeah, trying to preserve something that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. And it only works for a certain and I'm watching it. There's some people out there screaming bloody murder, and and I've been saying it in some maybe too plain of terms, but the only reason that people were minorities was because that majority went through and massacred half the planet. and the numbers are back up. So you're just going to have to get over yourself, because you're not going to get by with massacring half the planet in order to be the majority anymore. It sounds horrible and it sounds mean, and I probably just need to get over my attitude. But I see a lot of people throwing a fit because they no longer hold the power, but the reason why they will not own up to the reason why they have the power. And that is not the moral high ground.
Well, it's the fear of losing that power that they want to hang on to it so badly that they have to try to destroy everybody else.
It's a disease, and it's infected and taken over the planet currently.
It's true. It's not just in this country.
No, it's not just in this country. This country is just, everyone is, we're just showing where we're at.
Well, at least everything is being revealed right now, so we
It's
can
just
be our
not
own judge.
pretty.
We can be our own judge of that.
I think more than likely, at least my own frustration is actually there's some big changes on the way. I know that my own internal snow globe gets really spun up right before some big changes usually come in.
That's good.
Yeah.
Something to look forward to.
I think sometimes we can't always be positive. Sometimes I think we have to be where we are and accept where we are, so that way it can move into a new way of being. So I'm accepting my own frustration and I'm surrendering it, because really the only thing I can do is to take care of my health currently.
That's a good point, good advice, and a good place to stop. Well, thank you for listening and joining us.
Feel free to join the conversation if there's anything you'd like to add, or if there's questions you would like for us to address. Please feel free to leave them.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you and see you next
Thanks for
time.
joining us.
Ciao.